Were you and I born on the wrong continent? Is that possible? I'll tell you, our parents and grandparents certainly didn't think so. They saw the American dream, that is the middle-class dream, the dream of being able to raise your kids, own your home, have a pension, have retirement, have some security, have health care. They saw that dream full-blown. And then Ronald Reagan came into office. Well, that's my rant. Let's find out what Thom Geoghegan's rant on this is. Thomas Geoghegan is the author of a new book, Were You Born on the Wrong Continent? How the European Model Can Help You Get a Life. Thomas Geoghegan, his website, Thomas, T-H-O-M-A-S, Geoghegan, G-O-E-G-H-E-G-A-N.com. You can find a link to it over at thomhartmann.com. On the line with us, Thomas Geoghegan, welcome.
Hey, Tom. Thanks for having me.
Brilliant book, sir, you have written. An absolutely brilliant book. Let's just go through some of it. You talked about when unemployed, you'd certainly be better off in Europe. Europe is set up for the bourgeois. People who make $50,000 or below. Europe is set up for those people. We're set up for the rich. Is that what you're saying?
I'd say that we're set up for the plutocratic rich, not just the rich.
The super rich.
Yeah. And that's where the income growth has all gone, the very top tenth of the top 1%. I mean, even some of the rich are getting screwed in this country.
Yeah, the middle rich. You say, technically we seem far ahead, but don't drool. The U.S. super rich gobble up 2/3 of the increase. You're talking about how it looks like our per capita income is going up, but that's because a small number of mind-bogglingly wealthy people. You know, it's the old joke about, 9 guys are standing in a bar, Bill Gates walks in, and suddenly the average income went to $1 billion a person.
That's exactly the kind of statistical fallacy that's used to show that average income in the U.S. is higher than in Europe and so forth. Yeah, this book, especially Chapter 2 of it, tries to explain why this is, shall we say, a bit of a crock.
Yeah. Yeah, and not just a bit of a crock, a serious crock, in fact.
Yeah.
And in fact, not just for workers. I'm looking at page 81, and you've got the percentage of adults who are self-employed. And, we think of self-employed people, entrepreneurs, people who are starting their own businesses. I've done that many times in my life. Arguably, I'm self-employed right now. And in that, Louise and I own the business that is this radio and television program, and we've got some employees, but I think I'm self-employed. The government thinks I am. Certainly creditors think I am. In the U.S., that's 7.2%. In the Netherlands, it's 12%.
Yeah, it's very strange. John Schmidt at the Economic Policy Institute has done this study, which I am citing on that particular page. But the myth is that this is the continent of the entrepreneurs, and over there it's all people who are dependent upon others. There's far more entrepreneurship, starting up of new businesses in these so-called European socialist countries than there is over here.
And
one of and it makes sense when you think about the fact that if you've got single payer in some countries, if you don't have to take on health costs, the incentive to go out and start a business is actually greater over there.
Right. Here, for example, we used to have, before the bankruptcy reform, we used to have bankruptcy laws that allowed people to take chances. And, Henry Ford famously declared bankruptcy, I think, 7 times. Thomas Edison did. A number of famous American entrepreneurs, went through hard times before they hit it. Nowadays, it's almost impossible to declare bankruptcy if you're a small business person and have anything out of it that would allow you to restart. Mm-hmm. Whereas that's not necessarily the case in Europe. Not to mention, as you say, the whole social safety net thing, including and particularly health insurance. In the chapter, I'm sorry I picked the Germans. It was a fascinating story. You go over to Germany, you meet several people. One of them is this person who was formerly a CEO and now he's a labor organizer.
Yeah, that's strange. There are plenty of people. It's odd. When I went around Germany, Berlin, Frankfurt, even some of Germans who became friends of mine, who I thought of as lawyers and bankers and were, at odd times they would say, well, I'm in a union, and they would take out their union card, or even more extraordinary to me, they take out their Sparkasse government bank credit card. The Germans have all these government banks with low credit card rates and so forth that don't gouge people and that force sort of like a public option, all the other big banks to play at their level.
And it's kind of tied into the post office, as I recall.
Right. And then they often the Germans wink and nod at you. And these are people who are capitalists and just say, and will say, well, welcome to a socialist country. They sort of laugh about it.
Yeah, no, I lived there for a year. I know exactly what you're talking about. And in fact, with the year that Louise and I lived there, all three of our kids were in the German public school system. And I remember when Justin, our middle child, he was in the second grade, and that was the point at which they were doing the initial testing to determine whether this kid would be appropriate for the Realschule or the Gymnasium. Mm-hmm. And you talk about the dual track, and really three tracks that the Germans have, and the possibility of getting the full education that a young person needs to be able to have the full potential of their lives, not just for personal self-empowerment, but also so that they can be taxpayers.
Yeah. Thom, the editor of this book said to me, after she had edited it, she said, the extraordinary thing about this book is you go through and you talk about how Germany is so competitive and you never mention the education system, or you don't blame it on the education system, but I do. Their education system isn't about scoring well on test scores and so forth.
No.
It's trying to create a skill-based economy in a way that ours is, our economy is completely unmoored to anything in the economy, the real economy. It's all this kind of abstract competition on test scores. And we don't have an education system like theirs that is actually rigged up to specific skill development and to the labor movement, which has a real operating control of big parts of the German education system, so that they educate the kids not only into the skills, but in the union membership at the same time.
That's right. And they become tradesmen and journeymen, as they're going through school or as they first enter the workplace.
And they not only have those skills, but they have the political education from the system to know how to protect those skills.
That's right.
In the political process.
That's right.
So that,
back in the 80s,
the companies don't all move every single job abroad.
Right. And back in the 80s here in the United States, during the Reagan era, the conservatives led this war on public education that, oh my God, we're teaching the history of the labor movement in our schools. That's communism. We can, and all that's been stripped out of our schools now. We have an intern here, just completed public school, and he said, the limits of his civics class was memorizing dates. Nothing about the Wobblies, nothing about the labor movement, nothing about the 1935 Flint sit-downs, nothing. Anyhow,
if you want to be competitive in a global economy, you've got to teach two things. Number one, you've got to have an education system that is focused on skill-based education, which Germany is and ours is. And the second is you've got to have an education system that actually turns out citizens who can protect their rights and vote themselves a better deal.
Yeah, and understand their history and their power and where it came from. And to that, Thomas Geoghegan, and we have just a minute left here. You contrast Berlin with Chicago rather brilliantly. You say, after all, I just come from Chicago. Poor Brecht spent much of his life comparing Chicago and Berlin. You say, I'd like to see one monument in Chicago to all the children who've been murdered within a few miles of where I've been sitting writing this book. The contrast between America and the European dream, Thomas Geoghegan. Your thoughts on that? We have about half a minute for your thoughts on that.
It's in some ways, Chicago has become the darker city than Berlin. I mean, there's a kind of tragedy that is playing out here that no longer makes Berlin and Chicago equivalents. And I'm attracted to Berlin. I went there because I'm a Chicago guy. It's a big rambling city in the middle of Europe, like Chicago is in America. It's got a great perspective for seeing the way that Europeans live, and they live a lot better than we do in all sorts of ways, especially in the month of August, Thom.
You bet, yeah, with lengthy vacations that are mandated. Thomas Geoghegan, he's the author of a new book, Were You Born on the Wrong Continent? You need to check this thing out, thomasgeoghegan.com, the website. A link to it from ours. For more on this and other topics, please visit thomhartmann.com.